Chapter 4307. He Huan glanced at him but still picked up the phone. Kang Qiao said briefly that Rong Yu was leaving and the crew was going to hold a farewell party for him. He asked He Huan if she wanted to go. He Huan thought for a while. Okay, send me the time and location. I'll go. Kang Qiao whistled. Director He, you've got guts. He was sure that Qin Mo would be there, but He Huan still dared to go. He Huan smiled and hung up the phone without saying anything. The moment she hung up, she was almost pulled into Qin Mo's arms and her neck was bitten. She screamed and struggled to sit up. She touched her neck and it seemed to be a little bloody. He Huan was speechless. Qin Mo, what's wrong with you? He looked terrible and his breathing was a little messy. He Huan looked away and covered her wound with a tissue. Rong Yu and I are not doing what you think. If you're not happy, you can go straight to B City. You can leave right away if you have a private jet. Qin Mo was so angry that he laughed. He frowned. You want me to leave? He Huan's fingers paused for a moment. Actually, that wasn't what she was thinking. She was just reacting out of reflex when she recalled how Qin Mo had treated her. He must have misunderstood now, but she didn't want to explain it to him. She wiped her wound so hard that she almost scraped off a layer of skin. Qin Mo was indeed a little angry. As a man, he naturally wouldn't want her to go. But it was obvious that He Huan was also angry. She was as stubborn as him. Qin Mo sighed softly and reached out to hold her arm. He Huan. She didn't want to talk to him and continued to wipe her wound. Are you still angry? He looked at her. If you want to go, then go. I'll pick you up when it's over. He Huan was surprised and didn't speak for a long time. Qin Mo reached out and rubbed her short hair. Are you silly? Aren't you going to send me off? He Huan glanced at him and didn't say anything else. All right, go change your clothes. I'll send you off later. He patted her shoulder lazily, his voice a little hoarse. He Huan said that she would go by herself. Qin Mo looked at her deeply. Therefore He Huan did not insist. She went to the changing room while Qin Mo chose to sit on the sofa and smoke. Actually, as a man he cared. But deep down he knew that He Huan and Rong Yu were just a normal relationship. They had already filmed the film and it was just a meal. He could be more generous. After all, he was the one who would spend the rest of his life with He Huan, not Rong Yu. While Qin Mo was preparing himself mentally, He Huan went to the changing room. When she opened the door, she was stunned. In addition to her original clothes, there were a lot of new clothes hanging in the closet. Qin Mo must have prepared them for her. The tags were not opened and they were all good brands, at least 10 or 20,000 yuan. She was stunned for a moment and then looked in the direction of the living room. Looking at Qin Mo's back, she thought of what he said. He had done so much, but she didn't feel anything at all? He Huan let out a long breath, took out a black t-shirt and a denim skirt and put it on. She was born thin, so she looked very young and didn't look like a director at all. When she went out, she stood behind Qin Mo and said that she was done. Qin Mo was probably stunned for a moment, then turned around and saw her. Chapter 4308. He rarely saw her in dresses. Now that he looked at her for a few more seconds, he smiled. It looks good. He Huan lowered her head. I used to wear it like this too. He did not say anything. In fact, she realized that the clothes he bought for her were the ones she usually wore. There were not many dresses or lace dresses. He Huan said, My mom bought a lot of clothes with me when we went shopping. Qin Mo smiled. I know. I thought you didn't like those clothes. How did you know? She bit her lip. Qin Mo pulled her over and helped her tidy up her clothes before saying softly, Because those clothes are probably uncomfortable for you. He paused for a moment. Just like women, no matter how beautiful and noble they are, I won't want them if I don't feel comfortable with them. He Huan glanced at him and did not say anything. What do you mean by comfortable? He Huan glanced at him, picked up her backpack and walked in front. Qin Mo took his coat and followed behind her. From where he was, he could see her slim back. Although she was not tall, her legs were slim, straight and very fair. Qin Mo and she had known each other for many years and had lived together as husband and wife many times. But now, just looking at her back made his heart heat up. It was not only because of Yu Wang, but also because he wanted to hold her in his arms. When He Huan opened the door, he took 2 steps forward and put his hand on her shoulder. She turned her head and Qin Mo lowered his head. Let's stop fighting, okay? He Huan looked down and did not say anything. Qin Mo held her in his arms and entered the elevator. There was no one inside and he pressed her into his arms and kissed her. After a long time he stroked her neck. Does it still hurt? It hurts. She frowned. Don't touch it, it will hurt more if you touch it. Qin Mo smiled and let go of her. He coughed lightly and said, I thought you would block it for a while. He Huan looked at him as if he was an idiot. It's so hot, how can I block it? She snorted again. When others ask, I'll say that I was bitten by a dog. The result of her words was that she was bitten again, completely and utterly. He Huan was speechless. When they arrived downstairs, he drove her to the restaurant. It was already past 6 o'clock and it was time for dinner. He Huan asked if he wanted to go with her. Qin Mo sat with his fingers gently stroking the steering wheel. After a while he said in a low voice, I won't go. I'll wait for you here. He added, no alcohol and no other programs. Bossy, He Huan said as she opened the car door and got out. He held her back. He Huan glanced at him. Qin Mo had a gentle look on his face as he repeated, you're not allowed to drink. I'll wait here. He Huan's gaze fell on his face. After a long time she opened the car door and got out. She walked very fast. Qin Mo watched her enter the car while he opened the car window and smoked slowly. He had indulged her once and only once. Like He Huan, he was not a generous person. And today he must be crazy to allow her to have dinner with Lao Qing and even to say goodbye and hug. The more he thought about it, the fiercer he smoked. When He Huan entered the restaurant, she saw Kong Qiao. He was waiting for her there. Seeing He Huan, Kong Qiao smiled. You're here. We're just waiting for you. As he said that, he led He Huan in. It was a large private room with a long table instead of a round one. There seemed to be about 30 people sitting there and Rongyu was sitting in the main seat. Chapter 4309. When He Huan walked over, many people called out to her. In fact, in addition to being a director, He Huan was also someone that many people present wanted to curry favor with because of her relationship with Qin Mo. One had to know that Qin Mo controlled half of the entertainment industry. He just needed to give him some resources and he wouldn't have to worry about anything for the rest of his life. He Huan also knew this, but she never cared about it. In her crew she only cared about acting skills. If they acted well, they would be given a chance. Otherwise, no amount of flattery would work. She nodded at Rongyu and sat down casually. Kong Qiao and a supporting actress were sitting next to her. The supporting actress was from King Entertainment. She was a famous A-lister. She had been very attentive to Kong Qiao and wanted to promote her. However, Kong Qiao rejected her because she already had a wife. The supporting actress was called Ai Mengmeng. She was very pretty and had a great figure. She was also very sociable. During the dinner she was very caring and warm to Rongyu. However, Rongyu was always indifferent, so she became cold. Actually, Ai Mengmeng had heard about Rongyu and He Huan's past. Seeing that Rongyu was ignoring her, she knew what was going on. She didn't force him and continued to chat with the other men. He Huan, Kong Qiao and Rongyu naturally sat together and chatted. They mainly talked about work. Especially He Huan and Kong Qiao, who had been in the industry for a long time, they naturally had some things to teach Rongyu. Compared to others, Rongyu was too clean and simple. Even He Huan was considered a veteran. However, she was different from others. She was born into a good family and had the Qin family behind her. Therefore, she didn't need to scheme for a lot of things. People would naturally do it for her and she wouldn't be schemed against. As they chatted, they unknowingly drank some red wine. When He Huan felt a little dizzy, she realized that she had already drunk 3 glasses. She wasn't a good drinker, so she was slightly drunk after 3 glasses. However, she still remembered that Qin Mo was waiting for her outside. She didn't know if he had eaten, so she thought about it and said, I'm a little dizzy. I'll go to the balcony to get some fresh air. Rongyu and Kong Qiao were talking and nodded. Okay. He Huan took her phone and thought about it. She sent a message to Qin Mo. Have you eaten yet? Qin Mo was listening to music when his phone rang. He took it out and saw that it was a WeChat message from He Huan. He stared at those simple words for a long time before slowly replying, not yet. He waited for about a minute before He Huan sent him a message. Go buy some food. I'll be done in a while. Qin Mo looked at the time. It was already past 9 o'clock. How much longer? He Huan thought for a while before replying, maybe an hour or so. No matter what, I'll come out first. Qin Mo didn't say anything. He continued to lean against the back of the chair. He wanted to light another cigarette, but he didn't know why he put it back. He opened the car window to let out the smell of smoke. In the restaurant, He Huan put away her phone and was about to leave when a figure sat beside her. He Huan tilted her head and saw a familiar side profile. She paused for a moment and called his name, Rongyu. He smiled. Can we talk for a while? He Huan also smiled faintly. Sure. She looked at him. Congratulations, your future is bright. Chapter 4310. After He Huan said that, Rongyu smiled. He handed a glass of wine to her and held one in his hand. He Huan clinked glasses with him and sighed. Don't always stay at home writing scripts. Go out and make some friends when you're free. You're on good terms with Kong Chiao now. Networking is very important in this industry. Rongyu smiled. You mean to get a girlfriend? He Huan didn't explain. Actually, he knew what she meant. He also knew that she was with Qin Mo. Rongyu rarely drank, but he drank a few more glasses tonight. He sipped his wine lightly and seemed to have thought of something. He looked up at her and said, Do you remember what happened many years ago? He Huan shook her head. Rongyu only smiled and said, Look, you don't remember a lot of things, but I do. Do you know what Kong Chiao said to me that day? He Huan stared at him. Rongyu's fingers played with the wine glass in his hand. These words were painful for him, but he was going to leave soon. He wanted to tell her. They weren't together. If there were any memories, he would be alone. And he wanted her to be happy without any regrets. With some difficulty, he said bitterly, He Huan, have you ever thought that you've always liked Qin Mo and not me? He Huan was stunned. She held the glass and sipped the red wine gently. Rongyu placed his hand on her shoulder and patted her lightly. Then he walked away, leaving her alone. He Huan sat on the balcony, drinking red wine alone. After finishing one glass, she asked the waiter for another. She looked out at the night sky and thought about the past. Thinking about how she and Qin Mo had grown up together, she felt as if the past had been stirred up. She deliberately got herself drunk. Perhaps that would make her more natural in front of Qin Mo. Meanwhile, outside the car park, Qin Mo received a photo from an unknown number on his phone. He Huan and Rongyu were sitting side by side. Rongyu's hand was on He Huan's shoulder and she was looking up. The background was Sea City's night view. It was beautiful. Qin Mo silently looked at the photo and then deleted it. He waited patiently for a while before calling He Huan. Are you done? Her voice was gentle. Sitting on the balcony, He Huan mumbled, All right, Qin, but can you come and pick me up? He said yes. He Huan hung up the phone. It was not difficult for him to find her. Soon he saw He Huan on the balcony. He Huan was lying on the sofa, her soft, short hair covering half of her face. She was curled up, probably due to the cold. Qin Mo walked over and sat beside her. His voice was very gentle. Why are you here alone? He Huan's body moved. She tilted her head and looked at him with a slightly intoxicated expression. Qin Mo took off his jacket and put it on He Huan. He sat beside her and hugged her, enjoying the night view of Sea City with her. He said, Very sad. No. He Huan leaned on his shoulder and said a little foolishly, Why are you here? Qin Mo sighed softly. There was a little girl who seemed very sad, so I came. As he said that, his gaze fell on her face. He Huan looked at him eagerly. After a while, she suddenly hugged his waist. I'm not a girl anymore. Qin Mo smiled faintly. Yes, you're the child's mother. Chapter 43:11. He Huan was a little drunk. Lying on his shoulder, she stretched out a finger and gently stroked his handsome chin. Her gaze was a little intoxicated. Qin Mo, you are actually very good looking. He nodded and lowered his head. Go home. However, He Huan refused to let go and buried her face in his chest. Qin Mo, have you eaten yet? His gaze was a little deep. Not yet, but I'm full. He Huan looked straight at him. She didn't understand what he meant. Then she seemed to have thought of something and made a fuss about eating with him. Qin Mo frowned. Let's eat at home. With that said, he bent over and carried her horizontally, walking straight out. He Huan was still lying in his arms and was still making a fuss. Her red lips were slightly open, and her breath was puffing on his chest. Separated by a thin layer of cloth, it was a little numb. Qin Mo lowered his head and looked at her. I really shouldn't have let you out. You're so drunk. He Huan was in his arms and kept making a fuss about finding a place to fill his stomach. Qin Mo's heart was warm, but there was a kind of indescribable feeling in his heart. When he put her in the car, he didn't get in immediately. Instead, he stood outside the car and murmured in a low voice, My illness is not a trivial matter to you, is it? He Huan had him in her heart, but her feelings were too deep. She was never willing to say it and she was very stubborn. At this moment she was drunk, which was why she said what was in her heart and worried about him. Qin Mo looked at her. He Huan leaned against the back of the chair and looked at him while biting her lips. She said again, When are you going to eat? Qin Mo looked at her and finally smiled. Let's go now. He got in the car and took her to a health kanji restaurant. He Huan was still drunk. He fed her half a bowl of congee and quickly finished the other portion. When they walked out, she seemed to be a little sober, but after a while she hugged his arm again. Chin Mo, carry me on your back, okay? Huan. Under the street light, Chin Mo's gaze was gentle, but there was also a hint of surprise in his eyes. They had grown up together. When she was young he often carried her. Later, when she grew up and had her first period, she refused to let him carry her. In the past she had always called Chin Mo. Until that day he waited for her at the school gate. They were from a high school for nobles. He was in high school while Huan was in the middle school. The sun was about to set, but she still hadn't come out. Chin Mo went to the campus to look for her. At this time the huge campus was already empty, and there were not many people in sight. Finally he saw him under a sycamore tree on the field. Huan was sitting under a tree. He was wearing a white school uniform and had his signature short hair. She was very thin and small at that time, only about 155 centimeters, but very beautiful. And he, at that time, was already 182, could easily lift her. Chin Mo slowly walked over and sat beside her. Little one, what's wrong? Huan seemed to be startled. She turned to look at him, her nose a little red. She bit her lip. Why are you here? Chin Mo ran his fingers through her short hair and smiled. I've been waiting for you for a long time. What's wrong? You rejected my love letter? Huan's face was a little red and she turned her head. No. Then what is it? Chin Mo's voice was gentle and he stared at her. Huan didn't say anything, nor did she get up. She just sat there. Chin Mo wanted to pull her up, but when he moved, Huan screamed, "Don't move." Chapter 43:12. Chin Mo frowned, but he still pulled her up. However, his gaze soon froze. There was a small patch of blood on Huan's white dress. Chin Mo quickly understood. Huan was 14 years old and she was on her period. Chin Mo was a few years older than her, but he could only be considered a teenager. His handsome face was slightly red. Huan was the same. She glared at him and pursed her lips into a straight line. She glared at him and said in a low voice, "Turn around. Don't peek." At that moment, he came back to his senses and hurriedly took off his coat, draping it over her. He was 182 centimeters tall, and the coat reached her knees. Moreover, it was dark, so there was nothing wrong with it. Huan was thin-skinned and wanted to reject him, but she was feeling extremely uncomfortable. Her tummy was bloated and hurting a little. Chin Mo said in a low voice, "Let's go. It's getting dark. I'll accompany you to buy that." Stop talking. Huan glared at him and walked in front, looking a little tsundere. And that was exactly how Chin Mo liked her. There were many good-looking girls in their school, but Chin Mo never cared about them. The only one he liked was Huan. Everyone in the school knew that Huan was under his protection, so no one dared to have any ideas about her. In terms of matters between men and women, he and Yi Muyun were quite similar. The difference was that Cher did not dare to talk back because she was afraid of his big brother. As for Huan, he was afraid that Huan would look at her face. Chin Mo held Huan's hand and dragged her out of the school, not caring about how others looked at him. Huan refused to take the car, afraid that she would leave something in the car. That would be even more embarrassing. Chin Mo looked at the GM hotel in front of him and sighed. "I'll get a room. You can clean up inside and we'll go home when you're done." Huan looked at him. "Buy me that." Chin Mo smiled and dragged her, walking slowly with her. After a while, he asked her softly, "Is your stomach very uncomfortable?" Huan glanced at him. "What do you think?" Chin Mo laughed. "I might not have the chance to experience this kind of pain, but I can make you feel a little better." With that he picked her up. Huan screamed, attracting the attention of many people on the road. Chin Mo smiled. "My sister." "I'm not your sister." Huan gritted her teeth. Chin Mo smiled even more happily. "Then let's change it to something else. How about my future wife?" Huan's face turned red. She raised her hand and slapped him. "Let me go." He refused to let go. She struggled, but the moment she struggled, her stomach hurt. Huan was furious and glared at him. Chin Mo's heart ached. He asked in a low voice, "Does it hurt a lot?" "What do you think?" she asked, grinding her teeth. Then she turned her face to his shoulder and ignored him. She was as arrogant as ever. Chin Mo smiled and pinched her cheek. "We'll be there in a while." Huan harumphed again and continued to ignore him. Chin Mo only cared about his own business and soon arrived at the GM hotel. Due to his special identity, he quickly booked a presidential suite and carried Huan in. Then he called the waiter on the internal line to send sanitary pads over. Yihuan listened at the side. Her heart was in turmoil and she felt a little embarrassed. Chinamo hung up the phone and smiled at her. It'll be done in a while. Chapter 43:13. While waiting for the waiter, Chinamo took out his phone and Baidu. Then he looked at Yihuan in surprise. Being stared at by him, Yihuan felt as though her tail had been stepped on. She asked fiercely, "Why are you looking at me like that?" Chinamo smiled wickedly and waved the phone in his hand. "It says here that I can be a mother after my period." He was not even 20 years old, so this was something new to him. He looked at her with a passionate gaze. "Yihuan, can we make a child?" Yihuan wanted to vomit. "You wish." She stood there in silence and stopped talking to him. She was very uncomfortable now. Blood kept gushing out, so her little face became paler and paler until she could barely stand. Chinamo noticed her abnormality and immediately carried her. He called out to her twice, but Yihuan still fainted in embarrassment. When she woke up, she was already lying on the soft bed. Opening her eyes, she saw a handsome face in front of her. Yihuan was shocked. "Chinamo." His beautiful eyes blinked. "You fainted." Yihuan sat up immediately and looked at her bathrobe. She glared at him. "What did you do to me?" Chinamo smiled. "You fainted and I called the doctor. He said that you just lost a lot of blood. Then I knew that you liked to be clean, so I helped you take a bath and change your clothes. That's all," he said calmly, but Yihuan was already screaming. "Oh, you helped me take a bath? Is there a problem?" He frowned. "We used to bathe together when we were young." Yihuan lifted the blanket and wanted to get out of bed, but she felt dizzy again. Chinamo said calmly, "It's 10 o'clock now. I called Uncle Kaim and told him that you're sleeping at my house tonight. My parents asked you to stay the night." She was still staring at him. He added, "I also called my parents and told them that Uncle Kaim asked me to stay the night." Yihuan was furious and her face was red. "You are so shameless. I did it for you. Do you want me to tell the truth and say that we were in a hotel suite and I helped you take a bath?" Chinamo smiled and circled around her body before saying, "I lied to you. It was the waiter who washed it for you." "Oh right, the waitress." Yihuan heaved a sigh of relief, then became even angrier and threw a pillow at him. Her face, which had lost all its color, was now a little rosy. After venting her anger, she felt much better. Then she felt a little embarrassed. After all, it was her first menstruation. Chinamo probably knew what she was thinking. He rubbed her hair and said, "I've washed and dried your uniform. You can wear it tomorrow. Also, remember to put tampons in your bag in the future. I heard that girls are not always punctual, and I may not always be by your side." He was about to go to university, and Yihuan still had a few years left in this school. He was worried. But as the heir of King Entertainment, he didn't have the right to stay a few years behind. No matter what, he couldn't stay with her forever. After Chinamo finished speaking, his heart was moved and he tugged at her hair again. "Xiao Budian, did you hear that?" "What has it got to do with you?" Yihuan said. Chinamo stared at her. "How has it got nothing to do with me? Didn't I say it? You can be a mother now and I'm the father of the child." Yihuan was drinking water. A mouthful of water sprayed onto his young and handsome face. Chapter 43:14. The young Chinmo's face darkened. He glared at her for a while, but in the end he didn't say anything. Yihuan continued to drink water gloomily. She cursed in her heart. What did it have to do with him whether she could be a little mother or not? He was so bad. Chinamo sat on the sofa with his long arms and legs. He took the menu and looked up at Yihuan. "What do you want to eat?" Yihuan was only in her teens and didn't have a strong sense of gender. She was wearing a bathrobe and leaning against him. Her body was fragrant and soft. Chinamo glanced at her again and then passed the menu to her. "You order." There was also a small ordering device which was quite magical. Yihuan's fingers were white, tender, and soft. She studied for a while and then ordered a few dishes according to her preferences. She looked at him and ordered 2 of his favorite dishes. They grew up together, so she knew what he liked to eat. After ordering, she threw the order box to the side and wanted to move away, but Chinamo pulled her onto his lap. He had long arms and legs, so she easily sat on his lap, and she was so small. Chinamo frowned and looked at her with a look of disdain. "Come over here a little." Yihuan bit her lip and didn't dare to move. "Let go of me." She didn't move, so Chinamo dragged her over. He held her waist with one hand and gently rubbed her stomach with the other. Yihuan was shocked. He looked at her and said, "What are you thinking about?" I'll help you warm up. She was stunned again and looked at him. Chinamo smiled lazily. He hugged her like he was hugging a little doll. Huan felt warm. He didn't do anything else, so she leaned comfortably in his arms. She felt that the bleeding part was much better, and she even felt a little drowsy. Chinamo didn't stop, but his gaze fell on her little face that was about to fall asleep. Her face was a little pale because of the blood loss. Chinmo's heart ached, but he didn't know if he was mesmerized, so he kissed her lightly pink lips. Huan woke up immediately and looked at him in confusion. She felt that her lips were a little warm, but she wasn't sure if he had kissed her, so she could only stare at him. Chinamo smiled. What's wrong? Huan looked at him and was about to speak when someone knocked on the door. The meal is here. Chinamo easily picked her up with one hand and put her aside. He went to open the door himself. Huan swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. Chinamo opened the door. The waitress outside took a few more glances at him because of his young age. However, she heard that he was the heir of King Entertainment and that the girl he brought was also the daughter of a family friend. She seemed to be very treasured. It was said that she was on her period. This was probably the first time, so she was at a loss. However, it was great to have such a handsome and rich boyfriend. It was her first time having her period, and she was in a presidential suite with full service. Different people had different fates. Chinamo pushed the cart in and set it up. He took out a rose from the crystal vase and handed it to Huan. This is for you. I heard that a girl's first time has to be ceremonial. Huan took it and looked over. She realized that he had asked someone to send a cake over. Chinamo grinned and picked her up. My family's little princess. Huan was stunned. I'm not your family's. My surname is He. Chinamo held her firmly, a smile on his face. He said slowly, my parents always say that you're my family's. What do you think that means, huh? Chapter 43:15. Huan blushed and did not want to talk to him. She knew that he was good to her. She could vaguely tell that he liked her. But just as he said she belonged to his family. It did not feel good. Huan didn't like it. She was only a teenager. She knew that her big brother had already set his eyes on Tang Shue'er, who was only a few years old. She wasn't Tang Shue'er. She wanted to go out and see the world. She didn't want to be kept at home by a man. She belonged to Huan, not anyone else. Although Chinamo was handsome and had a good family background, she did not like it. Huan sat down quietly and watched as Chinamo cut a piece of cake for her. She stubbornly refused to eat it. Chinamo smiled. Are you still angry? Huan ate a small piece of cake. Chinamo pushed a cup of hot milkshake over. Drink something hot first. Huan looked at him, took a small sip of half a cup, and then started eating the cake. Chinamo watched her and smiled. Just a little will do. Let's eat. Huan deliberately ate a few more mouthfuls. It was a silent protest. Chinamo looked at her little face, smiled, and took away the cake in front of her. Chinamo, you are too domineering. Huan said angrily. Chinamo looked at her. Eating too much sweet food will make your stomach uncomfortable. She did not say anything and ate gloomily. Chinamo placed the dishes for her. You don't like me to control you? No one will. Huan was still gloomy. Chinamo rubbed his chin and said slowly, but the girls in senior high all want me to talk to them. Just one sentence is good enough. Then go and look for them. Huan was stubborn. Chinamo was furious. Huan, you. Huan glared at him. Why are you so fierce? Do you think you're great just because you're handsome? You're so weird. At that time she only thought that he was weird, but later she found out that it was because he liked a girl and it was natural for him to like a girl. Moreover, she was younger than him by a few years, and he felt that it was his responsibility to take care of her. In addition, he had seen too many images of his big brother treating Cher, so naturally he was influenced. Moreover, Huan was really small and he really wanted to protect her in his heart and treat her well. Hearing Huan's words, Chinamo laughed. You still know that I'm handsome. I also know that you are narcissistic, Huan muttered in a low voice. Then she felt a little better and began to eat her favorite dishes. She was small but she ate quite a lot. After eating, her stomach was full, and some of the blood she had lost seemed to have returned. Her little face even had some color. She took Chinmo's phone to play games, and Chinamo finished the rest of the food alone. Finally, he cut a small piece of cake and ate it very slowly. Then, he wiped his lips and asked the waiter to take the food away. He looked at the time. It was 9 at night, so he could let her play for a while before going to bed. He took a blanket and covered Huan. She was having fun and did not even look up. Chinamo went to the bathroom alone. When he came out he was wearing the same bathrobe as hers. His young body looked very good in the white bathrobe. Huan accidentally glanced at him and put down her phone. After a long time she said softly, "You have a good figure." Chinamo bent over and took out his phone. He said softly, "I'm going to bed. I still have school tomorrow." Huan's eyes widened. "I haven't done my homework." "Go to bed first. I'll help you do it tomorrow morning," he decided quickly. Huan. Chapter 43:16. Although it was a presidential suite, there was only one bed. Huan looked at the bed and then looked at Chinamo. Chinamo made the decision for her. "Let's sleep together. We used to sleep together when we were kids. Besides, I won't have any thoughts about you." As he spoke, he carried her over and trapped her in his arms. The two of them were covered by the quilt as if they were trapped in a fairy tale, but now Huan was carried by him and it felt like they had returned to the past. When she was unhappy and she couldn't walk or felt uncomfortable, Chinamo would always carry her on his back until they drifted apart. Chinmo's voice was a little hoarse. "Huan, are you sure?" Huan nodded and patted his back. Chinamo was stunned for a moment, and then he squatted down. "Come on." Huan leaned over and hugged his neck. "I'm done." Chinamo smiled. "It's as light as before." "Huan, can't you eat more?" "I eat a lot." She bit her lip, looked at him and then buried her face in his neck. "I'm so sleepy. I want to sleep." He didn't allow her to sleep and he wanted her to chat with him. Huan yawned again. "I'm so sleepy." Chinamo carried her on his back. After thinking for a while he gave up his car. It would take about 2 hours to walk from here to where they lived, but he was willing to carry her like this. His voice was hoarse. "Did you have a good night? Don't you have anything to say to me?" "What do you want to say?" Huan's little hands tightened and her breath was hot. Chinmo's voice was particularly hoarse in the dark. "It's about you and Rongyu." "Oh, it's all in the past." Huan leaned on his shoulder. "He told me a secret." His voice was even more hoarse. Huan propped herself up a little on his back and then gently bit his neck. "I'm not going to tell you." Chinmo's voice suddenly became dangerous. "Really?" Huan actually laughed and said yes while hugging his neck tightly. He patted her lazily. "I'll let you talk about it when we get back." Then he changed his mind. He carried her back to the car and drove all the way home. After returning home, they interrogated Huan on the king-sized bed, but he didn't say anything. In the end, Huan sobered up and remembered how ridiculous he was just now. After that, Chinamo kissed her tiny forehead and said in a hoarse voice, "I shouldn't have let you go. I regret it." The photo had been deleted but he still cared about it. Huan lay in his arms with her head resting on his chest and one hand hanging around his neck. She said in a distant voice, "Chinamo, I remember the past." He looked down at her. "What is it?" Huan looked up and smiled at him. "It was a long time ago." A dreamy look appeared on her face. "Do you still remember when I was in my teens the first time we stayed at the GM hotel?" How could Chinamo not remember? He didn't say anything but just gently rubbed her hair. "I thought you didn't remember." Huan was silent for a long time and then said in a low voice, If we grew up together, I would probably like you very much from the beginning, just like other girls." He was so outstanding and good-looking, but Huan had grown up with him, so she had long been used to all kinds of excellence and all kinds of good things about him. Chapter 43:17. She thought that if she didn't take it for granted, she would always like him. Just like what Rongyu said, he was a bit overbearing. She looked for the gentler Rongyu. She thought that it was because she liked him, but it wasn't. If it was, she wouldn't have fallen in love with Chinamo after marriage. And Huan didn't want to tell Chinamo about this. This kind of feeling was a mental journey for her. She also liked Rongyu before. Even if she was ignorant, she still liked him. So, no matter how he interrogated her in bed, she didn't say anything. This was also the reason. Chinamo smiled and looked down at her. Then he kissed her. He was a bit indulgent and she was going to film tomorrow. So, no matter how dissatisfied he was, he coaxed her to sleep first. Huan was in a daze. Suddenly, she hooked her arms around Chinmo's neck and leaned against him. "You told me a story that night." Chinamo laughed. "You still remember this?" Then his voice became low and hoarse. "What do you want to hear?" "Cinderella." She leaned against him contentedly. Her eyes were closed and her little face was soft. Chinamo couldn't help but pinch her face. "I've never seen a Cinderella as fierce as you. And I've never seen a prince as fierce as you," she said fiercely. Then she pinched his waist. Hurry up and tell me. Chin Mo smiled helplessly. Then he began to tell her a story. He Huan was already sleepy and fell asleep in less than a minute. Her sleeping face was a little soft and cute. Chin Mo looked at her for a long time before he put her down and left. He went outside to make a call. The person who answered the phone was none other than Rongyu. Are you interested in having a drink? Chin Mo said. Rongyu thought for a moment and said calmly, okay. Chin Mo changed into a set of outdoor clothes and covered He Huan with the quilt. Then he went out. The night was cold and it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. He and Rongyu had agreed to meet in a bar. The two outstanding men arrived almost at the same time. Chin Mo was dressed in black, while Rongyu was dressed in black trousers and a white shirt. Chin Mo picked a hidden spot and sat down with Rongyu. He only ordered 2 glasses of red wine. President Chin didn't call me here to talk about the script, did he? Rongyu asked with a smile. Actually, Chin Mo didn't know why he called Rongyu out. Was he going to ask about the photos? No way. That photo was only taken by someone intentionally, which was why there was a hint of ambiguity. This was too easy for Chin Mo to understand. He picked up the cup and smiled faintly. Of course not. I just heard that you're going back to B City tomorrow. We probably won't see each other for a month or 2. President Chin misses me? Rongyu suddenly asked. Chin Mo was stunned. He shook his head. Are you starting to be a pervert too? Rongyu laughed. Then, Chin Mo didn't ask anything and Rongyu didn't say anything. They just drank a glass of wine and sat for a while before they separated. Rongyu went back to the hotel while Chin Mo went back to his place. After getting into the car, Chin Mo suddenly said, I received a photo last night of you and He Huan. Rongyu smiled faintly and didn't explain. Indeed, there was nothing to explain. Chin Mo's eyes were locked on him. After looking at him for a while, he drove away. When he returned to his place, he didn't sleep immediately. Instead, he went to the study and made a few calls. Chapter 43:18. Then he smoked his cigarette and waited quietly. Until the call came back. I'm sorry, Mr. Chin. The surveillance cameras in the restaurant are broken tonight, so we can't provide you with what you want. Chin Mo held the phone and was silent for a while. Then he said in a low voice, okay, I got it. He slowly put down his phone and sat quietly smoking. His eyebrows furrowed slightly. He didn't tell He Huan about this. This little episode was over. He Huan continued filming as usual, while Chin Mo stayed in C City most of the time. He would go back to B City to visit He Huan for a day or 2 every week, and occasionally bring her to He Huan. Time passed quickly and Twin was about to wrap up. Chin Mo also received Rongyu's new script, Don't Talk to Him. He read it from beginning to end and had to admit that Rongyu was extremely talented. Ai Jia was the female lead for Don't Talk to Him, and Kang Chiao was supposed to be the male lead. However, Kang Chiao had acted in Twin, so he might not be willing. Moreover, after considering other things, he gave up and chose another capable actor. When He Huan came back, she saw a piece of paper and a script on the coffee table that Chin Mo had placed on it. She glanced at it and sighed on the sofa. Don't you think the actor you used is too old? Although Kang Chiao was used in Twin, the female lead was very lively. One was mature while the other was intelligent. They were a good match. How should she put it? Ai Jia's acting skills were not bad and he could hold his own in an artistic film. However, it was already a little difficult to match the background of the script. With the addition of an old male lead, He Huan as a director felt a little too old. She pointed out the shortcomings. You may be able to make the film feel good, but you have to consider the audience. If you must use Ai Jia, you'd better change the male lead or replace Ai Jia. Chin Mo leaned back on the sofa and put his hands behind his head. He looked at He Huan and smiled. Then who do you want me to replace? I'm not the one doing it. I don't have much of an opinion. He Huan stood up. I'm going to take a shower. Chin Mo reached out and pulled her. Sit down. I have something to tell you. He Huan sat down and looked at him. Chin Mo? Chin Mo smiled. Are you willing to do it? I'm not interested. She patted his leg. I probably can't capture Miss AI's beauty. You should find someone else. With that said, she broke free from him and got up to go to the bathroom. Who would have thought that he would not let her off even when she was showering? Following her in, he hugged her from behind and chuckled, Your words sound a little sour. I'm just doing what I can. He Huan continued to wash her body and thought for a while. From what I see, she doesn't have much spirit left. Chin Mo, you know very well that you're just doing this to return the favor. But you forgot, you're no better off than her. I know. He kissed her neck and sighed, "Your taste is very sharp, especially when it comes to choosing actresses. You really should be a man." Yihuan was a little speechless. "Chinemo, can you not say such things while hugging me?" She was a man. How could he kiss her? Chinemo smiled. "Let's shower together?" Yihuan rolled her eyes. "I knew it." An hour later they came out of the bathroom. Both of them looked satisfied. Chapter 43:19. During dinner, Chinemo suddenly said in a low voice, "Yihuan, I want you to film this film." She looked at him and took a sip of her aperitif after a while. Then she smiled faintly. "I won't work with AI Jia. You know the reason. Chinemo doesn't want me to do things I can't do. Also, I won't change my words. If you and AI Jia have an affair, I will quit." She added softly, "I won't argue with you. I can also maintain our current relationship. We can live together and take care of Yihuan. But we can talk about remarriage in the future. I don't want to be in and out of marriage." She also didn't want to be divorced a second time. Chinemo suddenly said, "I'm not asking you to take a picture of her, it's just..." He smiled faintly. "If you film, I'll still go to the set. We'll still live outside. Or we can film in Sea City. We don't even need to move." Yihuan was speechless. She shook her head. "You weren't like this before. I think as the President Chin of King Entertainment, it's totally okay for me to be willful for once." He chuckled and reached out to touch her face. "Don't you think so?" Yihuan didn't want to talk to him. She lowered her head and ate her salad. Filming is not a vacation. Chinemo just looked at her and smiled. He didn't say anything. Later, to Yihuan's surprise, Chinemo didn't replace the male lead. It was Aijia. He told Yihuan early the next morning. Yinan was a little shocked. After a while she said slowly, "It's a little unexpected." Chinemo didn't explain. He just reached out and grabbed her in his arms. He kissed her hard. "You heartless little thing." Yihuan felt a little pain from his bite. She slapped him away. "Are you a dog? It hurts so much. Also, I'm not from King Entertainment. Why do you always look for me when you change actors?" He dragged her into his arms again and locked his eyes on her. "Because I want to have our own work." But Yihuan wasn't interested in that. She lazily patted his handsome face. "It's Yihuan." Chinemo was speechless, but he still let go of her. "You really have no conscience." He got up, feeling a little disappointed. At this moment, Yihuan hugged him from behind and moved her face closer. "I don't want to film for the next 6 months. I'll stay in B City to accompany you. Isn't that good?" Chinmo's body stiffened. He couldn't believe it. Yihuan's fingers gently rubbed his shoulder and she chuckled, "Do you still think I have no conscience?" Chinemo pulled her over from behind and held her in his arms. "Really? Of course, this is on the basis that you keep your word," she said somewhat lazily. After she finished speaking, she broke away from him to wash her face and brush her teeth. Chinemo leaned against the bed and finally read the message in her words. She was taking from him. He chuckled and didn't say anything. He followed her to the bathroom and closed the door. After a while, Yihuan screamed, "Chinemo, you bastard." Yes, he was a bastard. He would only be a bastard to her. This time he made Yihuan late. In the end, he personally sent her to the set. Yihuan ignored him for a few days and refused to do it with him. Of course, that was a story for another time. When Chinemo drove back, he received a call from Secretary He, saying that AI Jia had gone to Sea City. Chinemo frowned. "Call her and tell her that I'll wait for her at the branch of King Entertainment." Chapter 43:20. However, by the time Chinemo arrived, AI Jia had already arrived. The atmosphere in the company was a little tense. Chinemo didn't mind. He had always been clear about the company. AI Jia was neither a shareholder nor a senior executive. He didn't know why his subordinates had to listen to her. So, when Chinemo entered the branch of King Entertainment, his expression didn't look good. He didn't know why those who didn't know what was going on. AI Jia was already waiting in his office. Chinemo looked at the door for a few seconds, then walked in and asked the secretary to pour 2 cups of coffee. AI Jia's voice was a little tense. "I heard you replaced the female lead of Don't Say He Talk with AI Mengmeng, is that right?" Chinemo drank the coffee lightly and said slowly after a while, "This is the company's decision." "This is Yihuan's decision, right? She doesn't want me to film and stay by your side, right?" AI Jia's voice was a little tense. Chinemo was still quiet. Yihuan isn't an employee of King Entertainment and has no right to make decisions. Besides, this film has never been decided on a role. AI Jia, I don't know why you're in C City, but I have something to tell you. AI Jia looked at him with an ugly expression. Qin Mo pressed the intercom. Send the document in. The secretary came over and put down a document. She said softly, this is from Secretary He, President Qin. Qin Mo gestured for her to leave first. When the door was closed, Qin Mo said softly, AI Jia, this is a supplementary agreement. I don't think you're in a good state of mind to film. Here's the liquidated damages. They'll be transferred to your account within 3 days. Check it. AI Jia was stunned. After a long time she whispered, Qin Mo, I don't believe you would do this to me. Qin Mo's expression didn't change. AI Jia, let bygones be bygones. We have to learn to let go. I do it, you do it too. It's because of He Huan, isn't it? She smiled softly. Even if I don't affect your lives, even if I just want to see you miss the land of Qin, I'm not allowed, am I? AI Jia picked up the document. What if I don't want to? The compensation agreement comes into effect automatically, Qin Mo said faintly before looking at AI Jia. I'll send you to America to recuperate. AI Jia looked down. Qin Mo, I don't want the contract, but I don't want to go back to America. I want to live in the land of Qin. With that, she walked out without looking at the agreement. Qin Mo clenched his fists. After a while the secretary came in. Miss AI has left. Qin Mo let out a long sigh. I understand. He went out and sat in his car for a while before driving back to his place. Asterisk on the other side, He Huan received a call from AI Jia. AI Jia's voice was very soft. Can we talk? He Huan recognized AI Jia's voice almost immediately. Are you AI Jia? Yes. AI Jia sat in the white sports car and took off her sunglasses. I'm on the road outside the set. There's a cafe by the road. Can we sit down and have a cup of coffee? He Huan went to the cafe. She was dressed very casually, completely different from AI Jia's exquisite clothes. The two women sat separately and the waiter brought the coffee. He Huan looked at AI Jia. Why do you have time to look for me? AI Jia's gaze fell on He Huan's face. After a long time she said in a low voice, I really don't know why he likes you. Chapter 43:21. What else? Snatch your buddy's girlfriend? He Huan sneered. AI Jia took a sip of coffee and said calmly, He Huan, believe it or not, even if I quit, Qin Mo won't be quiet around him. A man like him is destined to be entangled by women. He Huan laughed. After a long time, she lowered her eyes and said, It sounds like you admit that you're no different from those women. AI Jia's face suddenly darkened. She looked at He Huan and sneered, I hope you'll always be happy. She was about to leave when He Huan called her, AI Jia. AI Jia stopped. He Huan said in a low voice, Do you like Qin Mo or Qin Lu? Does Qin Lu know what kind of woman you are? AI Jia put on her sunglasses and just looked at He Huan. In the end, she left without saying anything. He Huan sat quietly for a long time before he finished his cold coffee. She felt that AI Jia was indeed a little abnormal. She sat for a while and then made a call to the United States. I want to investigate AI Jia. When she hung up the phone, she was actually in a bad mood. She went to the set in a bad mood, so she left work early in the evening. When she returned to the apartment, Qin Mo was busy in the kitchen. He Huan didn't know what special day it was for him to cook by himself. She was a little annoyed, so she sat on the sofa and lit a cigarette. She didn't smoke and just burned it. Qin Mo came out of the kitchen and saw her sitting there. He came over and rubbed her hair. Why did you light a cigarette? He Huan looked up and said, I saw AI Jia today. Qin Mo grunted and then said, I terminated the contract with her today. He Huan stared at him and sighed after a while. Qin Mo, I think AI Jia. Is there something wrong with her mentally? Qin Mo smiled and said, No, she's fine. He Huan was worried. I'm afraid she'll hurt Yi Huan. Qin Mo frowned. No. AI Jia is just a little bored. She won't do anything to Yi Huan. In his impression, AI Jia was a generous and decent woman who had never hurt anyone. He Huan looked down. I always feel uneasy. She always felt that there was a secret about AI Jia that they didn't know about. Even among the people she knew, no one understood AI Jia, and no one knew about the relationship between AI Jia and Qin Lu. Yi Huan's mind was in a mess, so she didn't do anything after dinner. She just took a shower and lay on the bed. Qin Mo begged her to have sex, but she didn't agree. She just quietly stared into space. Qin Mo's voice was low. I've terminated the contract with her. I don't care about her anymore. Yi Huan, I can't lock AI Jia up. She's an adult and individual. He Huan looked at him and said bitterly, I know. She still rejected him and turned her back to him. In fact, Ai Jia had an impact on their lives. At least her appearance made He Huan feel uneasy. Early the next morning, He Huan was a little uneasy. She was almost hit by a piece of debris on the set. Fortunately, Kang Qiao caught her in time and only a shallow cut was left on her arm. Red blood oozed out and He Huan was in a trance. At the same time, she got news about what she had inquired about in the US. An email was sent to her account. He Huan looked at the sender and decided to read it when she got back. Now she had to deal with the wound on her arm. Chapter 43:22. Kang Qiao looked at He Huan's bleeding arm and said in a low voice, I'll take you to the hospital. He Huan said no. Kang Qiao was very insistent and dragged her over. In the hospital, the doctor bandaged the wound and said it was a good thing it was just a scratch. If it had moved an inch, it could have hurt the aorta and it wouldn't have been just a small wound. After the doctor finished speaking, Kang Qiao looked at He Huan and said in a slightly reproachful tone, Don't you think you should be more careful in the future? There are stage keepers and art designers at the scene, and you have to do everything yourself every time. Look at this injury, it's not pretty. He Huan looked at Kang Qiao. Such a shallow wound won't leave a scar. Kang Qiao took the medicine for her and they walked out to the car. He Huan walked past him and before Kang Qiao started the car she said, Is there something on your mind? He Huan was a little surprised. You can tell? Kang Qiao wanted to rub her hair because He Huan's personality was similar to Su Mo's. However, he restrained himself and coughed lightly. It's written on your face. What's wrong with Chinemo? He Huan smiled weakly. Kang Qiao, do you know Ai Jia? Kang Qiao nodded. We worked together once or twice a few years ago. At that time, Ruan Yun was still his agent and had filmed 2 music videos with Ai Jia. They wanted to be a couple but Kang Qiao didn't agree. He Huan smiled. Kang Qiao looked at her. What are you smiling at? I have nothing to do with her. I'm innocent. As he spoke, he took out a cigarette and lit it. He smoked slowly and started the car. As he drove, he held the cigarette in one hand and said faintly, I have many stories in the past. Suemo was quite angry but he still chose to be with me. He Huan, when a man really loves a woman, there's no one else in his eyes except for scumbags. He Huan looked at Kang Qiao and said after a long while, Actually, you and Chinemo both have scumbags. Kang Qiao almost burned his hand with the cigarette. He turned to look at He Huan and said helplessly, I'm very loyal. He paused and said in a low voice, Actually, Chinemo is very loyal. I've never seen him with anyone else in all these years at King Entertainment. He Huan pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Kang Qiao, on the other hand, sent her directly to her residence. When He Huan opened the car door, Kang Qiao asked her, Do you want me to send you up? He Huan raised his arm and smiled. It's just a small injury. It's not a big problem. Kang Qiao also smiled and said, Okay, then I'll go back to the hotel. If I can't do it tomorrow, I'll take a day off. Anyway, I'm almost done with the shooting. A day or two doesn't matter. Most importantly, the budget for this show was more than sufficient, so there was nothing to worry about. He Huan nodded and went upstairs after saying goodbye to him. Chinemo was at home. At this time, he was sitting in the living room for a group's Video One channel meeting. Ever since he moved to C-City, he had been having meetings on Video One channel. When He Huan came in, he glanced at her, indicating that she still had some time. However, 2 seconds later, Chinemo turned to look at He Huan. Then he looked at the screen and said that the meeting was over. The senior management of King Entertainment's headquarters were dumbfounded, but Big Boss had the final say. Chinemo closed his notebook and walked towards He Huan. He frowned and asked, What's wrong with your arm? Chapter 43:23. He Huan bit her lower lip and said, I accidentally scratched myself on the set. Kang Qiao sent me to the hospital before he left. Chinemo held her arm carefully and looked at it carefully. He heaved a sigh of relief when he was sure that it was just a minor injury. He looked up and stared at her little face for a long time before he said expressionlessly, Being a director can also get hurt. You're not going anywhere. I'll go to the set with you starting tomorrow. He Huan was speechless. It's just a minor injury. He was still expressionless and didn't look like he was easy to talk to. Just a minor injury? He Huan saw that his expression was not one to be trifled with, so she lowered her voice even more. It's just a minor injury. Chinemo stared at her for a few more seconds before he suddenly picked her up and walked to the bedroom. He Huan hurriedly wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "What's wrong?" Qin Mo walked straight into the bedroom and carefully placed her on the bed. Then he called Qin Shin and said a few words. He Huan didn't feel good when she heard it. "It's just a minor injury. There's no need to get so many people involved." He actually wanted the best surgeon in Sea City to examine her. He was crazy. Qin Mo hung up the phone and looked at her. He Huan couldn't help but say, "It's only a 2-centimeter wound. There's no need for stitches. It's already been treated, Qin Mo." He glanced at her and then began to call again. This time she didn't know where he was calling. After the call, he looked at He Huan and said, "You don't have to film tomorrow. Take a day off." He Huan was furious. "I'm the director, Qin Mo. I'm the director's man." His gaze was gloomy. He Huan was a little angry. "Don't think that you're my man just because you've slept with me a few times." The light in his eyes was very strange. He stared at her for a while before he said faintly, "Then tell me, what should I do?" As he said that, his fingers gently stroked her delicate face. "Have a few more children to prove my existence? You're shameless." He Huan blushed. Qin Mo bent down, his handsome face right next to her neck. His voice was hoarse. "Actually, I enjoyed the process of making a child. Director I remember that you enjoyed it too." He Huan bit her lip and raised her hand to push him away, but she accidentally pulled her wound. She snorted and put her hand down. Qin Mo's expression changed. He gently held her arm and gently rubbed around. He looked at her again. "Does it hurt? Who told you to get so close?" He Huan said angrily, "It's just a small injury. Tell the doctor not to come. I'm not made of paper." Of course, Qin Mo was stubborn. He just helped her loosen her arms. After a while the doctor came. He was the director of a certain hospital. He was a very authoritative person. With his medical skills, Principal Su didn't find it strange that he came over to check on a 2-centimeter wound. After all, most of the nobles were like this, and most of them were making a fuss over nothing. The director looked at it solemnly and then looked at the medicine. He said that there was no problem. However, Qin Mo still had some requests. In the end, the director still left a bottle of medicine for external use. He said that it was a secret medicine of the Qing dynasty and that it would not leave any scars after being applied. After sending the director off, He Huan leaned against the headboard and did not make a sound. Meanwhile, Qin Mo was studying the small box of medicine. When he opened it, a fragrant aroma assailed his nostrils. It was obvious that it was not an ordinary medicine. Qin Mo looked at He Huan again. He Huan said unhappily, "Such a small injury won't leave any scars. Moreover, it's on my body, not yours." Chapter 43-24. Qin Mo's gaze was deep. After a while he smiled and pinched He Huan's face. "But I'm the one enjoying it." She glared at him and scolded him for being shameless. He smiled shamelessly. "He Huan, you don't understand men. Men are actually very shallow." He Huan turned her body away and ignored him. She closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. Qin Mo just smiled and laid her down. He said gently, "Sleep for a while. I'll wake you up for dinner." He even covered her with the quilt. He Huan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't want to sleep, but she didn't want to talk to him, so she closed her eyes. Qin Mo looked at her quietly for a while before he left to cook for himself. In addition to the normal food, he also made a bowl of red bean soup. It was blood-nourishing and tasted delicious. When He Huan woke up, she smelled the aroma of food. Beside her, there was another pleasant smell. She knew that Qin Mo was beside her. She moved and leaned her head on his shoulder. Her voice was a little hoarse. "You're so particular. You take a shower after cooking." He smiled and reached out to rub her soft hair. "I can't stand the smell of oil and smoke." "Then don't cook. Let someone else do it." She put her head on his lap and didn't hurry to get up. She leaned against him like a docile kitten. Maybe it was because of a small injury. He Huan never knew that she was such a coquettish person. Qin Mo smiled. It's different today. He was the president of a company. It was not easy for him to work in Sea City. He didn't have time to stay in the kitchen every day. He wasn't a wishy-washy man who thought that cooking for a woman was true love. A good man would give a woman a sense of security. It was different today. She was injured. Was it also a way for a good man to show off? He Huan poked him with her little hand and asked with a smile, "What did you make?" Qin Mo thought for a moment. "Your favorite food. There's also blood-nourishing porridge, blood-glutinous rice, red beans and red dates." He Huan frowned. "I don't want to eat red beans. Red beans were the food she hated the most. However, Chinemo insisted, "You must eat some." He coaxed her again, "Be good." "I don't want to be obedient." Juan bit her lip. "I think you want to poison me." Chinemo reached out to hold her little chin and twisted it dangerously. "What's in it for me to poison you?" "I don't know," Juan said softly. "Anyway, you made me drink red bean soup to poison me." Chinemo was exasperated and amused at the same time. "Juan, are you being reasonable?" She blinked. "If you don't let me drink, I'll be reasonable." He stared at her for a moment, then said, "Forget it," and picked her up. Juan hugged his neck and continued to bargain. "I just don't want to eat red beans." Chinemo looked at her, and his eyes became a little deep. "What else do you hate the most besides red beans?" His voice suddenly became hoarse. "If you don't want to eat red beans, let's choose something else." Juan didn't realize what he meant until a few seconds later. She blushed and glared at him. Chinemo smiled and pinched her face. "Are you willing to eat it now?" Juan glared at him angrily. "You're so hateful." Chapter 43:25. Is this your first time hearing about it? He laughed and placed her on the back of the seat. He pressed his hands on the seat and said in a husky voice, "Mrs. Chin, be content. It's rare for me to coax someone." Juan tilted her head and looked at him. His eyes were clear and bright as if he was laughing at her. Juan couldn't help but recall that after her first period, she didn't allow him to tell anyone about it. At that time, Chinemo only laughed. In the afternoon, he waited for her at the school gate. Seeing him reminded Juan of what happened last night, so she didn't want to go with him. But Chinemo insisted. Juan walked in front of him and Chinemo followed behind. He even put his jacket on her and said uncomfortably, "I heard that girls can't get cold on special occasions." Juan turned her head and looked at him strangely. "Chinmo's temperature is 32 degrees today. Put it on, there's air conditioning in the car." He grabbed her hand and carried her in his arms. This was in school and it was the middle school department. Among the thousands of people in the school who didn't know Chinemo. He was handsome and came from a rich family. Countless girls were waiting for his attention, but he was interested in a little brat from the middle school department. There were many people after school, so Juan struggled in his arms. "Chinemo, let go of me." He was so shameless. She was nobody to him and now her reputation was ruined. Juan was only 15 years old and she was engaged by Chinemo. After that hug, no boys dared to send her love letters, because the whole school was saying that she was Chinmo's girlfriend. Juan was furious and said that she was still young. Then Chinemo looked her up and down. She remembered clearly that he paused for a while and said that she was not young anymore. Anyway, he was not a good person. Juan was so angry in the car that she ignored him. Then Chinemo pulled her into his arms and rubbed her belly when she was unprepared. She struggled and screamed, but the driver pretended not to see it. He had watched them grow up and knew that they were going to get married in the future. But the driver only saw the beginning, not the ending. Chinemo held Juan in his arms and kissed her hair. "Does it still hurt?" Juan, who was in her teens, really wanted to tell him that it hurt, but she held back and twisted her body. "It doesn't hurt anymore. Put me down." He naturally refused, so she struggled. She really felt that Uncle Zhao would see her in the car. If he went back and told her, would she really have a child with Chinemo? She didn't know about the adult world, but she knew that Uncle Chin and Auntie Yi both wanted her to marry into the Chin family. Juan was still young, so of course she didn't want to. She had secretly read in a book that two people who got married were in love, but she and Chinemo. Forget it. He was always so fierce and domineering. They were not in love. It was more like they wanted to kill each other. She also knew that he would be going abroad to study very soon. At most, it would be half a year. She just needed to endure it, so in this half a year she definitely couldn't let him take advantage of her. But Juan's struggle unintentionally caused some kind of trouble for Chinemo. The 19-year-old Chinemo was a little embarrassed for the first time, and his voice was also a little hoarse. "Don't move." Juan was stunned, and then her face heated up. She didn't dare to move anymore. Chapter 43:26. Juan didn't dare to move, feeling something she shouldn't be feeling. She didn't dare to move, afraid that he would do something bad. After all, Chinemo was a bad person to begin with. Chinemo, on the other hand, laughed. He wrapped her up in his jacket and hugged her easily. Actually, old Zhao was a little worried. After all, young Master Chin was young and hot-blooded. If he wasn't careful, he might do something out of line. Moreover, they were in his car. How was he going to explain it? However, if something really happened, he still had to say it. Chinemo had to take responsibility, even though Juan was a little young. Thankfully, Chinemo held it in. As old Zhao drove, he secretly listened to the whispers behind him. Chinemo lowered his head and looked at Juan, saying calmly, "Come to my house tonight." Juan glared at him. "Why?" "Because Uncle Kaim and Auntie Sue are away on a business trip. You're the only one at home," Chinemo said matter-of-factly. Juan was furious. She reached out and wanted to call her parents, especially her mom. It was the first time a girl had her period and she wanted her mother to accompany her, not the annoying Chinemo. Juan turned her face away and wanted to get down from his lap, but Chinemo held her body and did not let her move. Then he said a few words to Lao Zhao. The car fell silent. The quieter it was, the more uncomfortable Juan felt. Then the car stopped in front of the black carved gate of Chiu Garden. The gate opened slowly and the car drove in. When the door opened, Juan didn't want to get off. She pouted. "I want to go home." Chinemo was still hugging her, staring at her face. "This is your home." "No," she muttered softly, not daring to speak loudly to him. Chinemo looked at her. "You've lived with the Chin family since you were young. You've spent more time here than at your own home. Isn't this your home now?" Juan felt a little awkward. She bit her lip. "I just want to go home." Chinemo exhaled, then looked at her and said expressionlessly, "Then I'll go back with you." Juan stared at him and did not say a word for a long time. For a long time, she didn't say anything, but she moved down from the chair and walked into the hall of the villa with a little pride. Chinemo smiled, opened the door and got out of the car. As soon as Juan entered the dining room, she saw a plate of nourishing red beans on the table. She immediately frowned. "I don't want to drink it." Just like poisoning her. But in the end, she was still forced to drink by Chinemo because he dismissed all the servants. Then he carried her on his lap and either kissed or drank. From that day on, Juan equated red bean with Chinemo. At one point, his kiss was like a red bean, as if he was trying to poison her to death. Just like now, Chinemo was using this trick to deal with her. In the condominium, Juan stared at the red beans and said, "I don't want to drink it." Chinemo looked at her and knew that she was thinking about the past, so he smiled and said, "Choose one." "No." She harumphed. Chinemo lowered his head and looked at her. Then he hugged her and kissed her. "Still not choosing?" Juan looked up and resisted. "Chinemo, you can't always do this." Chinemo smiled. "What?" Then he leaned in and whispered in her ear, "It didn't work last night, did it? Do you want to use it tonight?" Chapter 43:27. Juan glared at him and picked up the bowl of red bean soup. She wanted to drink it in one go, but she lost her courage after a while. She stared at his face. "I only bled a little." "You still have to drink it." Chinemo smiled and suddenly said, "Actually, watching you drink this is also a kind of pleasure." Juan was speechless. Sitting on his lap was another pleasure of Chinemo. Juan felt that he was quite a pervert. However, she looked at the red bean soup and couldn't drink it. She frowned and stared at it for a long time. In the end, it was Chinemo who picked up the bowl and looked at her. "I'll feed you." Juan was still staring at him. Her eyes were watery. She was like this every time she drank the red bean soup. Usually, no matter how fierce he was, she didn't feel any pain. Chinemo felt sorry for her, but at the same time he found it funny. He fed her slowly on purpose, enjoying the bitter look on her face. As time went by, Juan probably knew about his dark thoughts, but she could only be angry. Every time she took a sip, her face would turn bitter, which made Chinemo laugh. He then said in a low voice, "Do you have to be more careful next time?" Juan glanced at him. "You're making a fuss. It's just a small injury." Chinmo's expression immediately turned ugly. He looked at her. "It's a small injury this time. What about next time? What if it's a big fragment? What will you do?" Juan said slowly, "Then drink a few more bowls of red bean soup." Chinemo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He now overlapped her with the Juan of the past. It was as if she was still a little girl in her teens who had her period and he had to worry about everything. He stared at her. "Other than this, I don't have to worry about the wound?" Juan snorted. "Didn't Dean Su give you medicine?" "Medicine isn't omnipotent." He couldn't help but pinch her cheek. She would only be a little more obedient after drinking the red bean soup. This was also the reason why Chinemo especially liked to let her drink red bean soup all these years. It was also very dark. He Huan didn't say anything and China Mo started feeding her. The red bean soup was just a prelude. Feeding was necessary after that, except for the few years she was abroad. In those years their relationship was tense and she rarely came back. However, every time he went abroad he would visit her, but she didn't appreciate it. This was the first time he had fed her since she had returned to the country. It seemed to have been many years since the last time. They were much older, but he was able to do it with ease. For some reason, He Huan just sat there obediently and let him feed her. They were not young anymore, but at this moment, it was as if they had returned to the time when she was 15 and he was not even 20. He Huan was a lot more spoiled now. She would never eat anything she didn't like. After eating the red beans she became obedient, but she was also spoiled and needed to be coaxed. China Mo fed her patiently. Seeing that He Huan was still sitting on his lap, he patted her and said, "Okay, good girl. Sit over there. I'll eat first. I'll apply the ointment for you later." He Huan looked at him with a face that made people's hair stand. After a while she ran away. China Mo smiled faintly and watched her leave. Then he started eating. He Huan played games on his phone. After playing for a while, she suddenly remembered the email she had received. She glanced at him and said, "I'll go to the study." China Mo frowned. "You're injured. You need to rest." Chapter 43:28. China Mo glanced at her again and let her go. He Huan went to the study and turned on the computer to check the email. She opened it and saw pages of information. They were all about AIG's treatment in America and some photos. Of course there were also photos of China Mo. It was rare to find them after such a long time. She scrolled down the page and at the end there was a photo of China Mo and Aijia. It wasn't exactly a romantic picture. China Mo was standing with Aijia's head resting on China Mo's shoulder. China Mo lowered his head to look at Aijia. There was a hint of tenderness in his gaze. It wasn't love, it was tenderness, or perhaps it was pity. This was the first time He Huan saw tenderness in his gaze towards someone of the opposite sex. Although he wasn't hugging Aijia, he didn't seem to be pushing her away either. He Huan's heart skipped a beat. She had to admit that looking at the way he was taking care of her made her feel uncomfortable. But she couldn't seem to find anything wrong with it. At that time, Qin Lu had passed away and Aijia had a miscarriage. She scrolled to the end and saw the results. Aijia was indeed pregnant and had a miscarriage. He Huan closed her eyes and was about to destroy the email when she pressed one arm on the computer screen. He Huan looked up and looked at China Mo. China Mo reached out to stop her from unplugging the computer. He walked over and said, "What are you secretly looking at, AV?" He Huan's face turned red. "I'm not." Then as China Mo spoke he sat on the seat she was sitting on. He Huan was placed on his lap with one arm. He Huan bit her lip. She wanted to turn off the computer but he grabbed her hand. When China Mo saw the image on the computer he was stunned. He lowered his head and looked at her. "You're investigating Aijia?" He Huan turned her face to the side. China Mo flipped through the email. When he saw the photo he looked at He Huan again. He Huan pretended not to see his expression, but she knew that he had seen it. China Mo browsed through the documents and then said in a low voice, "Are you investigating Aijia or are you investigating whether there is anything going on between me and her?" He Huan looked down. "I accidentally received this email." "Accidentally?" China Mo laughed and deleted the email. Then he hugged her with one hand and pinched her delicate chin with the other. He didn't say anything and just looked at her. His gaze made He Huan's hair stand on end. She stared at him and said very slowly, "Aren't you going to apply medicine for me?" For the first time she took the initiative to stretch out her slender arm for him to apply the medicine. In the past she had refused to do it because she was afraid of pain. China Mo smiled faintly but He Huan's scalp tightened. She heard him say slowly, "Today I might need to apply the medicine in another place." He Huan knew that even though he could avoid death, he couldn't escape punishment. She closed her eyes. "What do you want?" He didn't do anything immediately. His fingers moved gently on her face. After a while he smiled. "Lie down." He Huan thought that she had heard it wrong. She widened her eyes. "China Mo, you can't." She was so ashamed that she couldn't say the last few words. Compared to her anger, he was very calm. "Of course I can." As he said that, he held her waist with one hand and flipped her over on his knee. That posture was as though he was going to beat her up. He Huan screamed, "China Mo, let go of me. I'm injured." "You're injured. I'll apply medicine for you later and add 2 bowls of red beans." He gritted his teeth and said, Chapter 43:29. Yihuan was furious. She lay there awkwardly and said in a trembling voice, "Chinemo, you bastard." Chinemo, on the other hand, was admiring her frightened look. He put the medicine aside with one hand and placed the other on the place where she was about to be hit. He said in a low and hoarse voice, "Are you scared?" "I'm not scared." Yihuan's voice was trembling. She felt his hand pinching her chin again. "Yes." Yihuan bit her lower lip. "Put me down." Chinemo pinched her chin and gently forced her to look up. Yihuan's eyes met with a pair of deep and clear eyes. There seemed to be a smile in his dark eyes. There was also a hint of scrutiny as he stared at her quietly. Yihuan was a little stunned and couldn't say a word. Chinmo's fingers moved dangerously, preparing to hit her butt. When she realized what he was going to do, Yihuan screamed, "Chinemo, I don't want it." She had to take it even if she didn't want it. After Chinemo pulled her down, he adjusted the angle of his phone and took a picture in her direction. Then he began to hit her. His expression was very focused and there was a hint of abstinence. Yihuan was stunned at first. She didn't think that he would really hit her like this. Then she felt ashamed and angry. She was so big. It was okay for him to hit her, but he even recorded it. Yihuan struggled, but he didn't let her. He pressed her back with one hand and stopped her from moving. Then he punished her a little more fiercely. In the end, Yihuan still cried. She laid her little head on his lap and cried miserably. And it was a little embarrassing. Chinemo hit her a few more times before he stopped. His voice was especially hoarse. "Are you still suspecting me?" He reached out and took the medicine. He looked down and stared at the red spot where she was hit. His gaze was a little hot. Yihuan was still crying. She looked a little pitiful. Chinmo's eyes were full of tenderness. He touched her with his fingers and said hoarsely, "You're already so big but you're still crying. It's embarrassing." Yihuan lay on her stomach and didn't want to move. Chinemo looked at her little face for a while before opening the exquisite little box. He picked a little on his fingertip and gently rubbed it on her wound. Actually, he wasn't injured, just a little red and swollen. How could he bear to do that? But even so, she was still so angry that she couldn't stop crying, looking like she had been bullied. Chinemo reached out and rubbed it for her. "Does it hurt? What do you think?" Yihuan was so angry that she lowered her head and bit his leg again. Chinmo's eyes darkened again. He lowered his head. "You're a puppy." Yihuan loosened her mouth, but she was still glaring at him in dissatisfaction. Chinmo's gaze didn't shift away. It was fixed on her face. After a long time he said in a hoarse voice, "Do you know your mistake?" Yihuan didn't want to talk to him, so she lay on her stomach. Chinemo didn't make things difficult for her. He helped her apply the medicine and adjusted her clothes. When he did that, he looked at her quietly for a while. He carried her on his knees and began to apply the medicine on her arm. She couldn't help but move a little when she was sitting on his lap. Chinemo looked at her quietly and helped her apply the medicine calmly. As soon as he was done, Yihuan wanted to run away, but he hugged her from behind. "Why are you running?" Yihuan struggled silently. "I have something to do." He didn't let go and said in a hoarse voice, "I have something to do too." Yihuan was a little angry. His matter was probably just that. She could imagine it even with her knees. Chapter 43:30. Of course she was unwilling. She struggled to run away, but Chinemo held her down and pulled her into his arms again. Yihuan was furious. "This is the study." He raised his eyebrows. "Study? Isn't that a place to do bad things?" As he spoke, he pressed on the computer. "For example, this." He wanted to do it without any explanation. Yihuan almost jumped up. "You're a disgrace." Chinemo stared into her eyes. His gaze was clear and bright. He was still sitting, but with one hand holding her, the other hand swept across the table. Everything on the table, including the computer, fell to the ground. As for Yihuan, she was placed in the place that he had cleared out. She wanted to leave, but he held her down and stopped her from moving. He raised his other hand and started to unbutton his shirt, but his expression was one of abstinence. "I want to do the most erotic things in the most proper place." Yihuan didn't know if it was erotic or not, she only knew that it was painful. What the fuck? Meanwhile, Chinemo laughed happily and carried her back to the bedroom to bully her a few more times. However, no one expected that the photo of Chinemo and AI Jia would be trending on Weibo the next day. Moreover, it was the #1 trending topic. One was a pop queen and the other was the boss of an entertainment company. The photo was so beautiful that it was trending all of a sudden. When Chinemo received the news, it was already 10 in the morning the next day. He woke up. The consequences of indulging in lust. He picked up the phone and heard Secretary He's slightly nervous voice. "Co Chin, your photo with AI Jia is on the hot search list." Chinemo frowned. He walked to the study and turned on the computer. Then he saw a familiar photo. It was the one he saw last night. He was sure that it wasn't He Huan who did it. She wouldn't be so stupid and wouldn't want others to see it. She clearly cared about it, so there was only one possibility. It was AI Jia. He immediately instructed, "Don't worry about it." Then he called AI Jia. AI Jia picked up and Chinemo asked her directly, "Did you put the photo there?" AI Jia paused for a moment before replying, "Chinemo, I'm in America, undergoing surgery. I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't have the energy to do anything." Chinemo frowned, hung up the phone and called K, a famous hacker. "Find out who bought the trending topic. Also, I want AI Jia's whereabouts, including her surgery." After hanging up, he dialed Secretary He's number again. "Remove the trending topic and don't tell He Huan about this." Secretary He immediately went to do it and removed it within 5 minutes. He even deleted all the content on it, leaving nothing behind. Just then K's information was sent over. Chinemo received it and opened it. This was an unexpected result. It was a record of He Huan's bank transfer. 500,000 was used to buy exposure. Chinemo looked at it quietly for a long time before he was sure that it was He Huan's. He didn't say anything but slowly sat down on the sofa. He didn't know why He Huan was doing this. But this transfer record was indeed He Huan's. Chinemo was about to delete it when the study door opened. He Huan's face was pale. He guessed that while he was dealing with it, she had already received the news or someone else had sent it to her. He smiled at her. "Come here." "I didn't do it," He Huan said quietly, standing at the door in her pajamas. After she woke up, she received a message from the bank. She had transferred 500,000 to a certain Lang. Chapter 43-31. Chinemo still let her go. He Huan looked at him stubbornly. "You've investigated it. You think I did it, right? Just because I investigated your past with AI Jia." Chinmo's voice was a little hoarse. "He Huan." She kept looking at him and said softly, "Would you believe me if I said AI Jia did it?" Chinemo still walked over and reached out to hold her hand. "AI Jia is having an operation abroad. So you think I did it?" He Huan bit her lip. "I didn't do it." Chinemo picked her up. "Why don't you wear shoes?" She still wanted to discuss this topic with him, but Chinemo didn't seem to want to talk about it anymore. He Huan's heart was a little tight. He put her on the bed and he gently helped her put on her shoes. But she didn't feel happy at all. She pulled his sleeve and looked up. "Chinemo, are you protecting me or AI Jia?" He squatted down and looked at her. He reached out and rubbed her hair. "Let me investigate this matter. The transfer records did come from your account." He Huan was a little absent-minded at first, but she suddenly became sober. She stared at him for a while and said slowly, "If AI Jia did it, what would you do?" Chinemo sighed. "He Huan, let me investigate it first, okay? Leave everything to me." He Huan didn't say anything. Maybe she was a little disappointed. She thought that if AI Jia did it, he wouldn't do anything to AI Jia. She didn't say anything. Chinemo rubbed her little head. "Be good. Don't think too much. It's not a big deal." "But you suspect me, don't you?" He Huan clenched her fists quietly. Chinemo picked her up and comforted her. "No, never." He Huan was still a little absent-minded. She had felt like this since she saw the photos. She didn't know how she fell asleep. When she woke up, the apartment was very quiet. She called Chinmo's name, but there was no sound. He Huan couldn't find him anywhere. She thought about it and dialed his number. Chinemo answered and said he would be back soon. In less than 10 minutes he came back. He was wearing outdoor clothes and said that he had gone out for a while. He knew what He Huan wanted to ask, so he said in a low voice, "Yes, it was done by a hacker." He handed her a document, and He Huan was stunned after reading it. How could this be? It was done by one of the top hackers in the country. He was very famous. "Ordinary people can't do this," Chinemo whispered. "He's hiding abroad, but I'll find him." He Huan looked down. "I understand." She felt that something was wrong. Chinmo's voice was calm. "It's not AI Jia. I've checked. They don't know each other." He Huan sat down on the sofa slowly. After a long time, she looked up at Chinemo and suddenly said, "Chinemo, I'm a little scared." He Huan had been stubborn since she was young and had never been scared. But this time she was scared. She felt that the person behind her would appear at any time and break her peace. What she and Chinamo had now. Chinamo reached out and caressed her face gently. It's not a big deal. Take care of it. He hugged her in his arms. When she couldn't see, his eyes were filled with coldness. Actually, he had found out that it was done by AI Meng Meng. She was an artist from King Entertainment and the second female lead of Twin. But Chinamo couldn't do anything to her. He couldn't tell He Huan about it either. He didn't want her to be sad. Chapter 43-32. After the short incident, Chinamo went back to B City. 3 days later, he went to C City to accompany He Huan. However, after this incident, it was obvious that there were some problems between the two of them. Even their sex at night was slightly affected. He Huan was obviously not in the right state of mind. Chinamo was quite considerate. Sensing that she was not in the mood, he did not force her. After holding back for a long time, he would hug her gently. Of course, President Qin was very dissatisfied with this pace, but he still endured it. This situation lasted until the completion of filming for Twin. The party was also held in a hotel in C City. It was not a big place and the crew and some familiar reporters were there. After taking some photos and accepting the interview, the banquet began. During dinner, Kang Qiao sat next to He Huan and said in a low voice, "We still haven't sorted out what happened last time. I see that you and President Qin are still not that good. Is there anything I can help you with?" He Huan held the red wine and shook her head gently. "It's nothing." She smiled at Kang Qiao. "I heard that Sua Mo is pregnant. Congratulations, Kang Qiao." She seemed to have thought of something and took out a box from her bag. "This is for Sua Mo." Kang Qiao looked at the box and knew that it was expensive, but he still accepted it and only said thank you. Given their relationship, this gift could be accepted. He Huan smiled slightly and chatted with Kang Qiao about something else. However, she felt that Kang Qiao was hesitant to say something, so He Huan did not ask. Later, Kang Qiao went elsewhere to socialize and He Huan was left alone. AI Meng Meng came over. "Director He, let me drink to you." He Huan tilted her head and smiled lightly. She picked up her glass and clinked it with AI Meng Meng. AI Meng Meng was a woman who was very good at acting coquettishly. Or rather, most women in the entertainment industry had a way with men, especially second and third-rate celebrities like AI Meng Meng. Therefore, when faced with He Huan, a director who was even better looking than her, she could still be flirtatious. He Huan had seen this many times, so she did not think much of it and did not want to provoke any resentment. She took a sip, thinking that the social interaction was almost over. But when she saw that AI Meng Meng was still there, He Huan was surprised. "Is there anything else?" AI Meng Meng's entire body was about to stick to him. Her breath smelled like orchids. "Thank you, Director He, for your guidance. Here's another toast to you." He Huan frowned slightly but still gave her face and took another sip. But AI Meng Meng still didn't leave. She looked like she wanted to give herself to He Huan. He Huan was speechless. She reminded her, "There are many producers and producers over there. You can socialize with them. It'll be good for you in the future." AI Meng Meng smiled oddly. "Actually, the person I should thank the most is Director He." He Huan didn't understand, but she didn't want to understand either. She had never cared much about interpersonal relationships. Thus, she only smiled faintly. This smile was somewhat distant. AI Meng Meng leaned closer and whispered, "Director He, I'm very grateful to you, so I still have something to tell you." He Huan glanced at her. AI Meng Meng lowered her voice even more. "You can check President Qin's travel records. He went to America once and didn't use his private plane." He Huan's heart skipped a beat. Then she looked at AI Meng Meng. AI Meng Meng revealed a shy expression again. "There's one more thing. Rong Yu and I are together." Chapter 43-33. He Huan was stunned again as she looked at the young girl in front of her. AI Meng Meng wasn't particularly good-looking and she didn't understand why Rong Yu had chosen her. AI Meng Meng explained her confusion. "We got together that night after Rong Yu left the set. She said that Rong Yu was drunk and she took advantage of the situation." Then she looked at He Huan with a vulnerable face. "Director He, you won't be angry." "Why would I be angry?" He Huan came back to her senses and smiled. "Congratulations." Although she said that, she knew that Rong Yu hadn't mentioned it before. It seemed that it wasn't as simple as it seemed. However, she didn't say it out loud. After all, it was someone else's private matter. Besides, she was more focused on the matter of Qin Mo going to the United States. She was indifferent. Ai Ming Ming felt bored and left first. Yi Huan sat there alone and gradually felt a little cold. Only then did she realize that it was already early autumn. She reached out to gather the clothes on her shoulders and slowly hugged herself. It was already 11 p.m. when she left the hotel. Chinemo had come to pick her up. He was leaning against a mulsan and smoking. His black suit made him look tall and slender under the dim yellow light. His face was especially elegant and good-looking. Even in the entertainment industry, there weren't many people with such a face. Yi Huan stopped and looked at him quietly under the moonlight. Chinemo walked over slowly and took off his jacket. He put it on her shoulders and buttoned it up one by one. Yi Huan looked up at him and didn't say a word. Finally he buttoned it up and smiled. "Alright, let's go home." Yi Huan was still looking at him. After a long time she slowly took a step forward. Chinemo put his arm around her shoulders and felt her shoulders stiffen. "Is our relationship so bad that I can't even touch you?" he asked in a low voice. It was a very oppressive tone. Yi Huan looked down. "No. Prove it to me," he said in an even more oppressive tone. Yi Huan spat out 2 words. "Lamp." Probably because he had been suppressing his anger for too long, those 2 words completely ignited his anger. He threw Yi Huan into the car and he quickly got into the car and drove away. Yi Huan was lost for words. "Chinemo, you." His voice was low. "You'd better not speak." She didn't want to talk anymore. After a while she couldn't help but say, "I want to stay in a hotel tonight." Chinemo was driving very fast. After hearing her words, he made a sharp turn and repositioned himself. It was a 5-star hotel owned by GM. Yi Huan did not speak again. 10 minutes later the car stopped at the entrance of the GM hotel. She opened the car door, got out and walked inside. However, Chinemo also came down and grabbed her hand. Yi Huan froze for a moment and turned to look at him. "Don't you like to stay in hotels? I'll fulfill your wish." He dragged her to the lobby of the hotel roughly and swiped his card for a presidential suite. Everyone in the GM hotel knew that he was the son of the Qin family. Because the Tang and Qin families were in-laws, Chinemo was now the head of the family, and the girl he was holding was. Yi Huan was ashamed and angry. She struggled desperately trying to break free. "Chinemo, let go of me, you bastard." The receptionists were shocked. The girl was forced. Chinemo, on the other hand, carried Yi Huan in his arms. "Stop it, Mrs. Qin." Chapter 43-34. That scene was simply soft to the core. The receptionist's heart skipped a beat. "Oh my God, it's Mrs. Qin. That's Director He who was filming in C-City." She heard that President Qin was filming with his wife in a mansion and was now staying in a hotel. Well, really? Eh. Someone suggested, "Let's take a photo and post it on WeChat." Then the receptionist took a hot photo and posted it on WeChat and Weibo. They even boldly tagged a few famous celebrities in the entertainment industry. So, in less than an hour, the hashtag President Qin and Yi Huan at the GM hotel became a trending topic. The netizens' heated discussion was also very unethical. However, Chinemo and Yi Huan didn't know that Chinemo had half-forced Yi Huan. He dragged her into the suite and kissed her on the door. Yi Huan was furious and slapped him. The slap probably aroused Chinemo's animal instincts. He gently pinched her chin and looked down at her. "How much longer do you want to do this?" Yi Huan's breath was in a mess. She glared at him. Chinemo leaned forward again and kissed her fiercely, ignoring her objections. In the end he succeeded. It was a little rough, but he didn't completely disregard her feelings. He was very happy, but Yi Huan was tortured badly. When it was over, she curled up on the bed and quietly lay on her side. There was a tear in the corner of her eye. Chinemo hugged her from behind. His voice was hoarse. "Why are you crying? Did I make you uncomfortable?" She ignored him and curled up even more. Chinemo couldn't stand her like this. He kissed her neck. "Let's do it again?" Her body trembled. "I don't want it anymore." Chinemo put his hand down again. He leaned against the bed and pulled Yi Huan into his arms. She was like a little beast in his arms. Her thin snowy shoulders were covered with a thin blanket. She was probably exhausted. Chinemo did not force her to speak. He just reached out and rubbed her shoulders. When he touched the place where he touched her, her little body trembled. He chuckled, "What's wrong?" Yi Huan pulled his hand to the side, placed it flat on his chest and pressed her face against it. He knew that she probably had something to say, so he waited quietly. After a long time, Yi Huan said, "Chinemo, did you go to the US last month to CAI Jia?" Chinemo's hand froze. After a long time he sighed. I found a doctor for her. Chinchin recommended him. He lowered his head. Are you unhappy? Huan didn't answer. She got up and went to the bathroom to take a shower. However, Chinamo followed her in and hugged her from behind. He didn't say anything and just kissed her. She knew what he wanted and she gave it to him. But this way she was more or less absent-minded and a little depressed. When she slept, she also carried him on her back. Even though he was hugging her, he could feel her resistance. I just found a doctor for her. Nothing else. Not even a hug from an old friend. Late at night, Chinamo whispered behind her ear. Huan stayed quiet and didn't say anything. He said a lot, but she didn't respond. It wasn't until late at night that she said softly, there are some things that you don't need to do in person. I don't know if you went to the US because she wanted to see you or because you wanted to see her. Chinamo, I won't investigate you anymore, but I also need a sense of security and enough trust. Chinamo let out a long breath. He wanted to say something but was interrupted by Huan. Sex can't change anything. Chinamo, just because you and Ai Jia aren't intimate doesn't mean that I won't feel uncomfortable. Chapter 43-35. With that said, she got up. I'll sleep in the small room. Chinamo wanted to grab her and he did. But the moment Huan turned around he was stunned. She was crying. Huan was a stubborn person and she rarely cried. Even when she was seriously injured when she was young, she didn't cry and tried her best to hold it in. But now she was crying. Her voice was unbelievably hoarse as she said in a very low voice, Chinamo, you might think that I'm easy to bully. Yes, you're a man, you're the high and mighty President Qin. You and Qin Lu are brothers, but Ai Jia isn't your wife. She took a deep breath. Besides, how I choose is my own business. After she said that, Chinamo looked at her and said expressionlessly, Huan, what do you mean? Can we break up? With that said, she flung his hand away and walked towards the other room. Chinamo was stunned for a moment, but the door was already closed. He walked over and knocked on the door. His voice was also very hoarse. Huan opened the door. There was no movement inside, and Huan didn't seem to want to open the door. Chinamo leaned against the door. Huan, be reasonable. There was still no movement inside. He tried to open the door but it was locked. Chinamo said a few more words to her outside, but she still didn't make a sound. He was a little angry but he held it in and called the front desk. Send me the key to the secondary room. The front desk looked at the time. Damn, it's already 2 in the morning and President Qin still isn't sleeping. Is he hiding because he doesn't want to be his wife anymore? But gossip aside, she still had to do something. The front desk lady immediately sent the key over. Moreover, President Qin's face was very dark, and it was obvious that he was unhappy. So, the front desk lady didn't dare to stay any longer and slipped away immediately. Chinamo took the key and hesitated before opening the door. He wasn't a man who could resist the Cold War, so he opened the door firmly. The moment the door opened, Chinmo's heart ached. Huan did not sleep. She sat on the carpet at the end of the bed, lost in thought. She was crying but no sound came out. She hung her head as if she had a nightmare when she was a child. Chinmo's heart ached. Her nightmare was now him. He walked over lightly and squatted in front of her. He reached out and stroked her shoulder-length hair. Your hair has grown so long. She ignored him and didn't stop him, but this made him even more sad and uncomfortable. Chinamo whispered, Don't cry, Huan. Huan finally opened her mouth to reject his existence. Go away. I don't want to see you. Then who do you want to see? Rongyu? He stared at her little face. Huan, I've explained. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, she slowly raised her eyes to look at him. Her eyes were watery as she stared at him. Then she sniffed. You're not leaving? If you're not leaving, then I'll leave. In fact, she was already very weak at this time, but she still stubbornly walked out with only a bathrobe on her body. Chinamo easily dragged her back. This time he was really angry. Huan, can you be more rational? It's the middle of the night. Where do you want to go? To a place without you, she replied quickly. Then she saw that Chinmo's face was very ugly, and there was danger hidden in his eyes. Huan took a step back. Chinamo grabbed her arm and dragged her into the master bedroom. Chapter 43-36. Chinamo grabbed her arm and dragged her into the master bedroom. He grabbed his tie, tied her hands and put them on the bedside pillar. His voice was a little cold. I'll let you go when you've thought it through. He Huan's posture was a little unbearable. She stared at him in disbelief and struggled. "Chinamo, you bastard." He got dangerously close to her. "Yes, I'm a bastard, but I can't bear to let you go." He Huan lay down in an unbearable posture. Her delicate face was buried in the pillow. She didn't want to cry, but her tears still fell down. She sniffled and didn't want to talk to him. Chinamo also lay down and stared at her little face. "I'll let you go when you've thought it through. It's not comfortable to hang like this for the whole night." He Huan was also very stubborn. She didn't say a word and ignored him. Chinamo was lying flat on his back. Although he had done it a few times and his body was a little tired, he couldn't fall asleep. Of course, he wouldn't sleep because He Huan was still tied up. After about half an hour, he said with a blank expression, "Have you thought it through? If you don't run, I'll let you go." He Huan was still stubborn and didn't say a word. She turned her head to the other side. Her slender white wrist was already a little red. Chinamo looked at her silently and gently pinched her little chin. "He Huan. Don't worry about me." She closed her eyes. "I don't want to talk to you now. Chinamo, why don't you let us calm down? Why are you forcing me?" "Because I'm afraid that you'll run away once I let you go, just like when I studied abroad." He answered quickly. His voice was calm at first, but it was probably because he thought that she liked Rongyu that he became angry again. When a man was angry, he would become a beast. He once swore that he wouldn't hurt He Huan, but at this moment he just wanted to torture her like this. He forced her to ask who she loved in her heart, him or Rongyu. He even forced her to call him husband. If she didn't call him husband, he would torture her even more. He Huan was very stubborn. She wouldn't do it no matter what. In the end, not only was she in pain, but he was also in pain. He had clearly wanted her for an entire night, but his heart felt even more empty and uncomfortable. What was worse was that He Huan had a fever. The fever was quite severe. Chinamo was a little confused. Although he was a little rough, he did not hurt her. After that, he was very careful. Even when he was angry just now, he still knew his limits. He Huan's fever was fierce, so President Qin, who was at a loss, called his sister again. "Chin, He Huan has a fever." Qin, who was still sleeping, immediately rolled his eyes. "Caught a cold? Brother, you didn't cover He Huan with a blanket." There was no reply from the other side, so Qin knew clearly. One night? What a breeding pig. He was already so old, yet he was still able to do it. Chinamo didn't say anything. Qin couldn't help but roll his eyes. "It shouldn't be a big problem unless your family gets violent again." Chinamo held the phone and said in a hoarse voice, "I didn't." But it was also a very rough way. Qin thought for a moment. Send her to the hospital first. Maybe it was caused by her emotions. He Huan's body has been weak since she was young. Even He Huan's body is. Brother, everyone in the family is very supportive of you wanting to be with He Huan. After all, you have liked her for so many years. But you must treat her well. Girls should be spoiled. Chapter 43-37. Chinamo hung up and started to help He Huan put on her clothes. When he touched her wrist, she moaned in discomfort. His gaze froze for a moment, then he looked at the wound on her wrist, his eyes filled with pain. She must be in a lot of pain. Chinamo closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he was more careful. He carried her carefully, forgetting that he was only wearing a shirt. He brought He Huan to the hospital in the wee hours of early autumn. When they reached the hospital, they took her temperature. He Huan was indeed running a fever, but it wasn't as serious as he had imagined. 39 degrees. Chinamo emphasized, "But I think her temperature is almost 40 degrees. It's so hot." The doctor glanced at him and took He Huan's temperature again, confirming that it was 39 degrees. Finally, he looked at Chinamo. "Mr. Qin, why don't you take her temperature too? Maybe your hand is a little hot." Chinamo paused and took his temperature. It was indeed a fever. It was a little more serious than He Huan's 39.5 degrees. The doctor laughed. "That's what I said." He stretched out his hand to write out the bill. "Both of you can take it together. You both have to work, so in 4 drip is faster. You guys are husband and wife, right?" Chinamo didn't say a word. The doctor's gaze landed on He Huan's wrist. The bruises reminded him that no married couple had such a heavy taste. He thought for a moment. "You're alone?" Chinamo was a little speechless. "We're getting married very soon." The doctor nodded and lowered his head to write. As he wrote, he said, "Actually, women have to be treated well. Marriage is a must. Some things are exciting, but they can easily lead to accidents. Don't you think so?" Chinamo rubbed his nose and didn't say a word. He felt a little fucked up. The doctor could tell that the patient's identity wasn't ordinary. The nurse said that a Mulsanne was parked outside the hospital in the middle of the night. It was a rare car in C-City. It wasn't until the doctor finished writing the bill and asked the nurse to take them to pay the fees that he had time to browse Weibo. Then he saw the #1 trending topic and found out that one of the patients was the CEO of King Entertainment and the other was his ex-wife. The doctor smiled. Ex-husband and wife could still be so how could they divorce? On the other side, Chin Mo carried He Huan and let her get in for drip. The nurses saw the news in the group chat of the doctors. They could tell that these were the male and female protagonists of the trending topic. They booked a room and stayed in the hospital until midnight. The nurses secretly took photos and uploaded them. Hence, in the middle of the night, Weibo was trending again, especially early in the morning. It wasn't easy for the ex-couple to go to the hospital. How violent was that? The reporters from C-City were already waiting at the entrance of the hospital, while the reporters from B-City swarmed over like sharks that smelled blood. They were all waiting for the male and female protagonists. He Huan was sick and did not have the strength to struggle. She obediently accepted the 4 drip, but she also ignored Chin Mo. At this moment she was very tired. She closed her eyes and fell asleep. She slept, but Chin Mo didn't dare to sleep. He was the more tired one, but he still supported himself and stayed by He Huan's side. He really loved and hated He Huan at the same time. He thought about giving up, so he said that he wanted a divorce. They were indeed divorced, but he couldn't bear to let her go. When he came back to look for her, he thought that he probably wouldn't be able to let her go in this lifetime. He thought he could do it, but in fact he couldn't, he never could. In his heart, there was an indescribable feeling, but he could only quietly stay by her side. Chapter 43-38. They were indeed divorced, but he couldn't bear to part with her. When he came back to look for her, he thought that he probably wouldn't be able to leave her in this lifetime. He thought he could do it, but he couldn't, he never could. Even though he went to America to find a doctor for AI Jia, it wasn't on purpose. It was just along the way because it was the anniversary of Qin Lu's death. He couldn't tell He Huan too much because she might not believe him or understand. Just like that, Chin Mo could only fall asleep after the drip ended and the 4 was removed. But how could he fall asleep? He was half awake and half asleep, worried about He Huan. Just like that, Chin Mo reached out to check He Huan's temperature. After confirming that there was no problem, he went to sleep. At 8 in the morning, when Chin Mo woke up, He Huan happened to wake up as well. Their eyes met and there was an indescribable feeling in them. He said softly, "I didn't mean to hide it from you, I was just afraid that you would be unhappy." He Huan didn't say anything and leaned against the pillow, thinking about something. Chin Mo placed his hand on her forehead and said softly, "Her fever is gone. Let's go back to the apartment and head back to B-City in the afternoon." "I'll go back myself." He Huan's voice was very soft and weak. Chin Mo stared at her and said slowly, "It's not what you think. He Huan, why can't you trust me?" He Huan pursed her lips and decided not to talk to him anymore. He had no choice but to call the doctor to discharge her. When they went out, a bunch of reporters were already waiting outside with their cameras raised, ready to take pictures of them. He Huan's face was a little pale. She walked out of the hospital with Chin Mo in his arms. The reporters' questions were very tricky and unpleasant. Chin Mo's expression was very cold. In the end, secretary he had to arrange for security to escort them out. Sitting in the car, Chin Mo looked at He Huan and said, "Have some breakfast." The car was a spacious motor home with a sumptuous breakfast. There was even a partition in the back seat so they could eat freely. But He Huan didn't want to eat at all. She curled up in a corner and looked out quietly. Chin Mo frowned and put a glass of milk in her hand. "Drink it." His voice was somewhat stern but also somewhat commanding. He Huan ignored him and continued to sit there looking out of the window. Chin Mo was a little angry but he suppressed his anger. "He Huan, what do you want?" She finally turned her head and looked at him quietly. "I want to be alone. I want to live by myself when I return to B-City." Chin Mo stared at her for a long time and finally confirmed that she was serious. He closed his eyes and said calmly, "Do you really have to fight with me over this?" He Huan Ai Jia was Qin Lu's girlfriend. Qin Lu died for me and their child couldn't be saved either. I can't be that cruel. He Huan's eyes widened slightly as she looked at him. She thought it was his decision. A woman's intuition and Ai Jia herself had said that she was interested in Chin Mo, but he still held on to her. Go to one of his past. He Huan's eyes were watery, and her throat moved uncomfortably as if it was blocked by something. After a long time she said softly, "What if I can't understand? Then I'll be cruel, right?" He didn't say anything. Sometimes silence was cruel. Huan stared at his eyes and finally turned her head slowly. She looked out at the morning in Sea City and many people were busy with their daily lives. Chapter 43-39. Chinamo looked at her side profile and didn't say anything. His expression was unusually ugly. Secretary, he sat in front, feeling a little anxious. The two of them were at loggerheads again. Actually, she didn't want to criticize President Chin. Why couldn't he let someone else handle AIGA's matter? That was probably how straight men were, only caring about their own feelings. From her point of view, AIGA's motive wasn't very pure. She didn't know why President Chin still wanted to have contact with her. Was it because AIGA was good-looking? That wasn't it either. AIGA was much older than Huan. No matter how she looked at him, he looked a little old. Secretary, he wanted to say something but felt that whatever he said might not be right, so he gave up. The car stopped at the bottom of the building. Huan opened the car door and got out. Chinamo followed behind her. When they reached the apartment, she went straight to the changing room to pack her luggage. She took her original clothes. She didn't touch any of the ones Chinamo bought for her. Chinamo stood at the door and looked at her. When Huan pulled up her luggage, he came over and pressed on it. He looked at her. "Are you really going back to live by yourself?" Huan pulled up her luggage and said briskly, "Yes." She pulled her luggage and left. Chinamo held her arm. "There won't be anything between us." Huan flung his hand away and said coldly, "You can promise others." With that she turned around and left. When she left, she felt dizzy for a moment, but she quickly calmed down. She paused for a moment but still left. Of course she didn't go back to B-City on her own. Chinamo wouldn't let her go back alone. But as soon as the private plane stopped, Huan left on her own. Her car was parked at the airport. She put her luggage in the car and drove away. Chinamo stood there, his face livid. He didn't look good. After a long time, Secretary, he came over. "President Chin, you have a schedule later." Chinamo stared at her for a long time before looking away. "Let's go." After she left, they really did not contact each other for a week. He was waiting for her to come back, and Huan's personality was like that. Chinamo didn't ask about her, but he could still get some information. For example, when he returned to the Chin residence, his parents would casually mention that Huan had come and ask him if he was planning to go on a blind date. "Mom, why would you ask that?" Chinamo sat on the sofa and flipped through a magazine with a troubled mind. Liangqiu said coldly, "Because you're not young anymore. It seems like you don't even have a decent female companion for your dad's birthday, let alone a wife." Chinamo paused for a moment and then smiled faintly. "Isn't there Huan?" Liangqiu sneered. "How long has it been since the two of you slept on the same bed? You have the nerve to say that." She always cared about her son. Seeing that her son had lost weight, she also felt a little distressed. She sighed and said, "You can't bear to let her go, but you don't want to get her back. Huan is very good. If she makes up her mind to leave you for a blind date, it will be too late for you to regret it." Chinmo's face was still a little unfathomable. He didn't say anything, which made Liangqiu so angry that she didn't want to acknowledge him as her son. How could he be so stupid as to leave his wife again and again? She sighed and said, "Look at you. Needless to say, Mu Yun, Qinshin and Mumu are both very good, but you and Qin Lu. Speaking of which, I haven't heard from him for several years. I don't know where he went to carry out his mission." Qin Imo narrowed his eyes slightly and clenched his fists. Chapter 43-40. This was one of the reasons why he kept Aijia under control. He didn't want his parents to know about Qin Lu's death. To a certain extent, he blamed himself, or he was even more restrained than Aijia. However, because of this matter, he was drifting further and further away from Huan. Qin Lu, Huan was the most important person to him, but he couldn't do anything about it. Chinamo was in a terrible mood. That night he went to a bar for a drink. After rejecting a few women who came up to him, he still lost the mood. He left and got into his car. He buckled his seatbelt slowly and put his hands on the steering wheel slowly. He sat there quietly for a while before he took out his phone. He unlocked it and looked at Huan's photo. His heart was in a trance. His slender fingers caressed the photo, and he didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time he called her phone. The ringtone rang again and again. Huan didn't pick up. Chinmo's eyes darkened. He sat alone for a long time before he started the car. He drove to He Huan's apartment when it was almost 11 o'clock. The night sky was filled with loneliness. He rolled down the window and quietly sat in the car, smoking. He had been smoking a lot recently. It seemed to have become a habit. He would smoke when he missed her. He looked up at her apartment. The lights were off and he didn't know if she was asleep or not. However, Chinemo soon found out. About 10 minutes later, He Huan came back. She didn't come back on her own, but was sent back by a man. He recognized the man to be a rather famous producer, and he had a rather handsome appearance. He Huan got out of the car. She was wearing a black dress. It was a tight-fitting dress with strapless straps. It looked especially good on her slim body, and it gave her a sense of innocence. Although He Huan was over 30, she was small and her skin was tight. Chinemo often felt that she was still a 20-year-old girl. As her husband and the man who could hug her, of course he had the right to speak. But now she brought another man home. He wasn't sure if he was the only one who had the right to speak. When he got out of the car, he was naturally very intimidating. The producer looked at Chinemo with a subtle expression. He walked over and said, "President Chin?" Chinemo nodded and walked over slowly. He said magnanimously, "Send He Huan back?" As he spoke, he looked at He Huan with an unfathomable gaze. The producer also knew that he had misunderstood, but it wasn't really a misunderstanding. He Huan was single and he heard that she and Chinemo didn't get along well recently, so he had the intention to pursue her. Therefore he asked someone to make He Huan drink 2 glasses of wine at the reception today so he had the chance to send the beauty back. He didn't expect that Chinemo would be here. Liang Bin, the gold medal producer, wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and smiled. "Yeah, director. He had 2 drinks so it wasn't convenient for him to drive, so I sent him off." Chinmo's expression was a little reserved. "Thank you, Mr. Liang. You're welcome. That's what I should do." Under the pressure of Chinemo, Liang Bin didn't dare to do anything else. He wanted to leave as soon as possible. He said goodbye and Chinemo didn't stand on ceremony either. He watched him leave. He Huan was still standing there watching Liang Bin leave out of politeness. But as soon as the car left, she immediately turned around and walked into the hall. Chinemo grabbed her hand from behind, and there was a hint of danger in his eyes. "Pursuer?" He Huan shook him off and turned around. "So what? Does President Chin have a problem with this?" Chapter 43-41. She didn't look like she was going to run, so he let go of her. He put his hands in his pockets and looked at her quietly. After a while he said, "Don't forget who you are." He Huan didn't say anything and looked up at him. Under the light, she was wearing a black dress and her skin was very fair. She must have not been exposed to the sun recently. He also realized that she was wearing high heels. He thought to himself, she's still a shorty in them. President Chin is also very cute. But he couldn't deny that she was very beautiful tonight. The dress was damn fitting for her. Just as he was admiring it, He Huan said indifferently, "I know who I am." Her angry look pleased him. He took a step forward and He Huan couldn't help but take a step back when she saw his expression. Chinemo reached out and caught her easily. He Huan fell into his arms and her face was planted on his chest. She looked a little embarrassed. What was worse was that she was wearing high heels so her foot was twisted by the impact. He Huan cried out in pain and her face scrunched up. "It hurts." Chinemo looked down and saw that she didn't seem to be faking it. He felt a little sorry for her but he didn't show it on his face. "Where does it hurt?" He Huan couldn't stand any more. She frowned and said, "I twisted my foot." Chinemo silently looked at her feet, then bent over to pick her up. He carried her with one hand and removed her high heels with the other, then threw them away as they passed the trash can. He Huan bit her lip. "It's more than 20,000 yuan. He looked down at her and snorted. "It's a waste of space if it's more expensive and it doesn't fit." He Huan was a little angry. She turned her head and said, "You're talking about yourself." He carried her into the elevator and looked at her. "I'm only worth 20,000 yuan? He Huan's voice was a little low. "It's only 2,000 yuan to call a Nyo Ilang outside." "You've called him before?" He sneered. "Do other men know your body better than me? Can they make you feel so comfortable?" He Huan couldn't talk to him anymore. She chose to shut up. Chinemo carried her into the apartment, put her on the sofa and squatted down to look at her. He Huan frowned and looked at her foot. There was indeed a red ring around it and then her eyes turned red too. "You're usually not very independent and powerful. Why are you crying now?" Chinemo stared at her and coldly said, It's none of your business. Huan pursed her lips and wanted to stand up to find some ointment. Chinamo held her down and said, "Don't move your ankle." As he spoke, he looked at her. "Is there a medicine box here?" Huan was indeed in pain, so he told her. Chinamo went to get it. He came back and squatted in front of her. He was dressed in black and looked very handsome. But now that they were so close, Huan could smell the faint scent of perfume on his body. It was indeed not her brand, so her little face tensed up. Chinamo didn't even raise his head as he said in a very low voice, "I went to a bar to drink some wine and accidentally rubbed it." Huan pursed her lips and didn't say anything. He looked up and said, "Don't you have anything to say?" "No," Huan said in a bad mood. Chinamo chuckled softly. "If you don't have anything, I'll help you apply the ointment." Then Huan felt a pain as if her tendons and bones were dislocated. She almost screamed, "Chinamo, be gentle." That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.